You're listening to Lighthouse Conversations, brought to you by Lighthouse Haven, a spiritual home for your awakening soul. Lighthouse Conversations is a show where awakening souls gather to be inspired, connected, and enlightened. Spiritual spark plug and host Chelly Canales, that's me, will guide you through the twists and turns of your journey to a safe haven where you are finally free to live your best light. Each episode contains a conversation with a guest who has gone through a spiritual awakening, detailing their unique and life-changing experiences in an intimate and candid way. Although everyone's experience is as unique as they are, we all share one common thread. We're all seeking something. So, come join us on this journey and be prepared to leave with resources that will supercharge you into inspired action. Here's today's episode. Hello, awakening souls. You found it, Lighthouse Conversations. It's here for you, and we are going to bring you another story of an awakening soul right now. I cannot wait to introduce you to Katie Hilborn, who's a great friend of mine, who also happens to be an amazing humanitarian and a Millennial Changemaker of the Year runner-up. She's incredible, and she brings us to that place where science and spirit meet. Take a listen.
Thanks for having me, Chelly.
I'm so glad you're here. So Katie has done incredible things in the world, as you were able to see a moment ago. I want to hear from your mouth. Where did you come from, and what happened in your life to send you on this trajectory of spiritual awakening?
Wow, well, it's a loaded question.
We got time.
We got time. Yeah, you know, I truly believe that we have these little bit of awakenings sporadically through our lives that, see, where did it all begin? Well, I guess my question would be to you is, what is your definition of spiritual awakening? Mm-hmm. And then if I can have some context in that, I'll be able to frame it.
So it's that moment when your life is suddenly not the same. You realize that the way you've been operating, the way you've been living isn't actually your true self. There's an awareness that expands. There's a vibration shift that happens. And for some people, it can be kind of a slow burn, like this doesn't feel right, this doesn't feel right. And suddenly you look down the line years later and you're like, I'm in a completely different life. How did that happen? What exactly shifted in me? And it's not just a change in circumstances. It doesn't have to be a job change. It doesn't have to be, a new partner. It's suddenly like I was living on this level and now I'm living on this level, and things I thought I understood, things I thought I knew, suddenly don't make sense the way that they used to anymore. So yes, it could be a slow burn, or it could be some catastrophic event that's like, through this pain, I'm suddenly in a different place. Hopefully that explains that for you.
Yes, definitely. So, right, I would say in high school, I was kind of, there's three types of people in the world. Those that talk about people, those that talk about things, and those that talk about ideas. And in high school, I was the first of those three categories. I talked about other people. I really only cared about what was happening on Friday night, who liked me, who didn't like me. And so I was the first of that category. And as I progressed through life, immediately after college, I decided to take a self-actualization trip for myself, and I went to East Africa.
Wow.
I flew into Nairobi, Kenya, and this was kind of a, discovering myself, discovering the world. Who am I? What is my place within the world? And that's kind of what set me on the path to change. So that was right after I graduated college in summer 2006. And through that, I was starting to discover that there's so much more on this planet than my upbringing and how we were raised. And Americans have it incredibly lucky to be born in such a privileged country. And I know that there might be a large percentage of the population that think there's many Americans that are not lucky. But in the grand scheme of things, in relative terms to how the rest of the world, especially the third world, live, we are in that top 1% of people. And so, yeah, that's kind of what started me on this path. And as I was traveling around East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, I was discovering a lot about myself and kind of realizing that was my first shift, my very first shift. Now, with these kinds of awakenings or spiritual awakenings or whatever you might call it, the Buddhists call it enlightenment, there's always these little bit of hiccups that occur along the way before you fully wake up into your power and who you are.
That's such an important point to highlight for our listeners out there. It's not just fun and games, y'all. It doesn't happen just one time. You're like, I did it. Yes, I'm enlightened. It's a series of course corrections because you're going to learn something and then you're going to learn something else, but always from an increased state of awareness because you're already at that next level. So thank you for pointing out that, you don't go on the trip one time and you're like, I did it. Yes. Here's the t-shirt. Ooh.
Right. And that's so true. So, in 2006, gosh, it's been a while. So in 2006, that was my first mini awakening. And I came back to Colorado, Breckenridge, a ski town where I was living. And I was so upset with the wealth inequality that I saw. I remember one day I was at the bar and walking home and passing all these multi-million-dollar homes when I had just come from a country where most of the population lived in these huts with dirt floors, and I started crying because I said it was just kind of that first turning point in my life.
So from there, you've done really great things in Colorado and the Denver community, and worldwide as well, which we'll get to. But you've been a major influence on your friends in this community, and you've been an active part of helping them go to their awakenings as well. Could you talk a little bit about how you felt inspired to do that, and what results have you seen from that, whether it's intentional or just happened to be a byproduct of that?
Yeah, so in 2006, I had my little mini awakening, but then I got back in the rut and the grind of first world living, and I kind of receded a little bit, and I went back to sleep because we're conditioned in a world that if you're not part of the herd, that's herd mentality. If you're not part of the herd, there's something wrong with you. If you're not doing what the majority of people do, there's something wrong with you. And so that little infiltration, that little voice slipped back in, and I in my opinion, I went back to sleep. I went back to my old self. Now I was, the awakening and progression kind of travels in a spiral, right? So it's not linear. It's not necessarily cause effect in an upward linear line. It travels in a spiral. So as you're coming around, you spiral back to the same problem, and then you move forward, and then you spiral back to the same problem, and then you move forward. And that's kind of how awakening is, right? So I was more awake than I was before I left to explore the world, but I had retreated a little bit. So that was in 2006. Fast forward to 2012, and I accepted a teaching job at an international private school in Saigon, in Vietnam, on a 2-year contract. That was 2012 to 2014. And during this 2-year period, I had gone through a lot of trauma. Now, don't get me wrong, Saigon was a hell of a lot of fun. Every weekend I was exploring different parts of the country and exploring new cultures, and the people were, it was just a lot of fun, don't get me wrong. So in my 2 years in Saigon and just living in a third world country, existing, dating, having friends, having a social life, exploring, in my 2 years there, I had realized that there was just something wrong with the masses. Now, I don't want to say wrong because it's not a negative or a positive, it's not a better or a worse, but something didn't seem right. It seemed that all these people were going through their mundane existence and just, I don't know, just existing, just, living to exist. And it just seemed really superficial. And I'm not talking about the local Vietnamese people, but the expats that had moved over there from first world countries that were living in this third world country and kind of exploiting the people, and just some of them were badly behaved in how they would talk down to the locals. And I just thought, there's something wrong here, and I can't quite place it. And my friend Lauren, who is now one of my gurus, we were sitting there at a street cafe just watching the traffic go by, and she said, well, yeah, they're all asleep. I was like, what do you mean they're asleep? What is this, the Matrix? Like, what do you mean they're asleep?
Actually.
Yeah. And she goes, no, they are going through programs and they're going through social conditioning, and they're completely unaware that they're doing this. They are asleep. And that was kind of the beginning of my spiritual awakening, in that I started really exploring that. Well, what do you mean is to be asleep or to not be asleep? What does that mean? And that's when I really started studying up on different modalities, such as, manifestation techniques and laws of attraction, and Buddhist philosophy and Hindu philosophy. And I started exploring all the different world religions and trying to find a common thread of what this means to wake up, to find enlightenment. I mean, all the major religions have some form of this. So it's kind of, that was the catalyst.
That was the catalyst. And you've been able to bring it to this Denver community as well, which we'll get into in a second. But I wanted to touch on a couple of things you said. So I think those are two main points that happen when people have an awakening. So there's that thought in your brain like, wow, there's something wrong here. I see suddenly a pattern in the general population that I don't resonate with anymore. And it does seem like they're asleep. And that's hence the awakening term is coming out of that and being aware of what that actually is. And the second point was when you're young, because I know since I was a kid I've had this, feeling different, feeling like I don't belong here. This is not my planet. I don't know if I said those words to myself, but I felt like I was from another planet. And I did a great job making friends and having a good social life and, just doing the things that you're supposed to do, but always having this knowingness that there's something weird about me. And I think that's a common thing that happens too when you realize I'm living somehow in the wrong world. And then you learn the terminology, you have the right teachers, and then suddenly you're like, no, this is my world, but I just operate in a different way. And with these tools, I'm better able to show up in the world in the way that I want to.
Yeah, well said. Well said, Shelley. So that was in 2014, and my friend Lauren and I, we decided to go to Bali to do a vision quest. Bali is a very high vibrational part of Indonesia and the world, and already, there's tons of Hindu influence there already. So when you have a large mass of people already spiritually awakened in whatever dogma they subscribe to, whatever their archetype is, it really doesn't matter, because the fundamental vibrational beliefs of that dogma are the same. Now, we might have a pictorial representation of what that might look like. So the Christians might have Jesus, or Buddhists might have Buddha, etc. But the frequency, if you bring it down to the simplest form, Nikola Tesla once said, if you want to understand the workings of the universe, think in terms of frequency and vibration. And so if you can, and this is like really pulling in from ideas of quantum mechanics and theoretical physics. So it's not just a religious thing. It's not just a spiritual thing. There is theoretical physicists out there that think in terms of vibration and frequency, for example. Now I'm going a little bit in tangent.
I like it. Do it. Take it.
You can cut this.
No, I love it.
So I want to backtrack just a little bit. I was born and raised Episcopalian, Christian. I attended Sunday school every single Sunday from birth till about 18. And around 18, my little brother, my kid brother, came out of the closet. He told us he was gay. He was 2 years younger than me at that time. And this is back in, 18. This is like 2000, 1998, around that time. And even just being, how many years ago was that?
2018?
20 years ago? No, 20 years ago. Yeah. Even though it was just 20 years ago, there were an incredible amount of people that did not understand homosexuality.
So true. Yes.
And I was watching all these religious people, the Christians of my own faith, basically telling my brother he was going to go to hell for being gay. And I knew in my heart that this was genetic. He was born this way. Mm-hmm. And so if you really want to talk about my first shift, that was probably it. Like, what is going on here? There's got to be something else. And it put me on a path of self-discovery. From that point, because I knew that I was still feeling, hearing, being absorbed in all these supernatural things that I didn't really quite understand, right? Like anything from synchronicity to just feeling, living, and breathing it. And maybe in my mind, the dogma of Christianity didn't make sense, but I really still wanted to find answers for what I was experiencing. So I turned to science, and I turned to physics, and I started reading up on Einstein and Stephen Hawking and Mikio Kaku, and from there I discovered string theory and M theory. Now I'll give the layman's terms a little bit on that.
Yeah, please do.
So a lot of these famous physicists of our time believe that we live in a multidimensional world. So you have your 3 dimensions, length, width, and height, and then time. Einstein adds the 4th dimension, time. So that's what we see, feel, and hear every day, right? So we live in 4 dimensions. However, a lot of these major physicists believe that we actually live in infinite amount of dimensions. So string theory is that we live in a 10-dimensional world. It can be proven mathematically. We live on these vibrating strings. If you think about, like, you pluck a guitar string and it vibrates. Yeah. And these dimensions are all wrapped up inside of us. They're coexisting alongside of us. As Mikio Kaku often says, that we could be living side by side amongst a separate universe full of dinosaurs, and we wouldn't even know it, because these universes are so wound up inside of each other that we can't see it, right? So that's string theory, 10-dimensional world. M theory, which stands for membrane, is 1 dimension, is string theory plus 1 more. So, you know, of course it's theory right now, but many well-respected, world-renowned physicists subscribe to these types of ideas, and this is where quantum mechanics comes from. And so I've spent my entire adult life using science to explain my spirituality.
I think that is a really beautiful thing to do in tandem, because a lot of people will dismiss woo-woo, right? If you can't see it, you can't prove it, it's not there. Just not taking into account to intuition and feelings and knowings and all of that. So if you bring the scientific aspect in it and they can meet, now that right there has got legs for even more of the population. So it's a really beautiful thing to support what you're learning spiritually with the scientific community as well.
Right.
I'm excited to see what else we're going to learn, that's going to be discovered.
Right. I mean, think about it. Just 100 years ago, Einstein's theory of relativity was a farce. I mean, people looked at him like a quack, essentially, and they dismissed him. But now, it's in every single high school textbook. So imagine where we'll be in 100 years.
Paradigm shifts, right? So we get used to something, and then that breaks up, and we get used to something else. And so it's fun to kind of be a part of helping the people in your community understand this as well, because you've taken the time, you've done the research, you've done the work. And so when you bring that to them, what kind of reaction do you get from people who maybe have never heard anything like this before, or they've heard of it but they didn't know what to make of it, or they think they know and they try to tell you you're wrong? I'm just curious what various reactions you get.
I have so many theories on consciousness. I basically, since 18, when I decided to stop going, and there's nothing wrong with Christianity, it did not fit with my paradigm, right? Like I said, the frequency, the energy is the same. The pictorial representation of what I was feeling just no longer resonated with me. You know, I do believe that all religions are correct and all religions are wrong, right? Mm-hmm. It's just your personal interpretation of that. There's nobody's right, nobody's wrong. So it's really about what resonates with you. And so I've been using science to quantify the unseen world and the supernatural world that I have experienced my entire life. And what was your question?
Just how do people around you take it? Because you are very open, and one of the things I really value about what you do and how you show up in the world is that you will put things on Facebook. You will have community gatherings, high vibrational this, or, you know, quantum that. You're not afraid to use your voice and to your grand community, not just people who already agree with you and know what's going on. You're not afraid to do that. Or if you are, you don't show it. So I'm curious what kind of response you get, because you've got people on the corporate side who don't talk about this. You have people from the very spiritual side who maybe seem to be even more entrenched in it than you are. I'm just curious what kind of feedback you've gotten and what kind of shifts you've seen take place.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of funny, but I feel that I'm neutral amongst all belief systems. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm smack in the middle of everything. Even in my political beliefs, I am smack a moderate, right? So even my political beliefs, a lot of my friends are both Democrat and Republican. In my spiritual beliefs, I have a lot of friends that are Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, just spiritual, and then I also have a ton of scientific friends. It's funny that I literally feel that I can resonate on some level to all of them. Mm-hmm. And in that, I feel that this is why I've spent my entire life's hobby, right? This is a hobby for me. This is what I read in bed before I go to sleep. Is that forever quest, this thirst of knowledge of why are we here? How does the universe work? I love it, right? I've been exploring higher consciousness for my entire adult life. And it's something that I really enjoy. So to answer your question, you know, it's kind of this thing where I piss off everyone, but I piss off nobody. And I'm okay with that. Because I will find some common ground, whether that be, you know, relating to somebody's archetype or trying to find the science to back up what is going on.
That's great. Well, I know I'm grateful for you bringing these communities together here in Denver, and you know, now you're bringing it worldwide. So that's fantastic. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people who are maybe beginning this journey or who are resonating with what you're saying, but don't actually haven't spent a lot of time yet figuring out what to do about it?
Let me think. Advice for others. Yeah. You know, the advice that I would give for others that are just embarking on their own path is discovery, self-discovery, constant exploration, and constant curiosity. 4 out of 5 ex-boyfriends polled have a nickname for me called Curious Katie. It's very funny. They don't even know each other, but they all call me Curious Katie. And that is just constantly asking questions, constantly asking, what if, why are we here? And that's how it starts. You know, you're not only finding your own purpose, but you're able to find out, why am I on this planet? What is my life's purpose? What am I made to do? And it starts with asking questions, right? That's how it begins. You start asking questions, and then you start exploring, and you find out what resonates with you. There's so much crap on the internet. So as you're researching on the internet, if you feel constricted right here when you're reading something and you feel like icky, it's probably not true. Like, follow that intuition, that little voice in your head. Your intuition knows. And conversely, as you're reading through this research and trying to discover things, if it feels good for you on a cellular level, then start that exploration. Go down that path and see where it leads you.
I think that's beautiful. We actually talk a lot about that here with Lighthouse Haven. It's that feeling in your body that, do I resonate with this? Do I not? Does it fit? Does it not? And how important that is. So thank you for bringing that up as well. And I'm totally with you on the curiosity. I go down the rabbit hole and I just have to learn this and this and this. And suddenly you're all over the place and you've collected all of this knowledge that helps inform what it is that you're learning. Oh, I love that. I think being curious is one of the greatest things that you can be, because we never stop learning. We're always going to be learning. So I wanted to ask you about your life's work, your nonprofit. How does this, if at all, go in tandem with the work that you're doing? And if you could explain a little bit about your work as well.
Yeah, so there's one more point of shift that I need to talk about before I get there. So in 2014, my girlfriend and I had gone to Bali for a spiritual vision quest. And through this deep, guided, transcendental meditative techniques that I can't really yet share with the world, but knowing that there is a specific process to it. Through this transcendental meditation, I stated my intention at the beginning of it, and I said, what's my life's purpose? Why am I here? And through this, in this meditation, my consciousness actually came up above my body and then was looking down over the planet. And I was shown an image of a grid. Now, at that time, I didn't know what to call this grid. And all I knew is that it looked like the pattern that's on a soccer ball. That's all I knew. And now later, after doing some research, I was actually, after the fact, was Googling soccer ball pattern grid laid out over the planet, and there's a name for it. It's called the Earth Consciousness Grid. So, but anyway, in my meditation, as I was looking over, I was shown that I need to help raise the frequency of the planet. And in order to do this, I need to work on myself. And I was told that as I continue to raise my own vibration and raise my own frequency, people in my vicinity can't help but to rise up with me. And that was one of my purposes on this planet, is to in turn affect the people around me. And it begins with these little ripple effects. By working on myself, the people in my vicinity, it kind of just, it blossoms out, right? It ripples out, and other people start doing the same, if that makes sense.
It definitely makes sense. I think that's where we start, right? Our own work. We can't fix anybody. We can't change anybody. All you can do is find out what's going on with yourself, and as you begin to clean those things out, it just naturally occurs with others too.
You know, I think at the end of the day, it's about, you know, a lot of people that are going through mini awakenings are trying to figure out, how do they fit into this? Mm-hmm. And where do they fall into just becoming aware of what's going on in the world, right? I often talk to people about becoming change makers. Changemaker essentially turned complaining into action.
Yes, I love that.
And we're not that much different than business entrepreneurs, meaning we want to help the state of man and reach as many people as possible. So I actually travel around high school and colleges giving keynotes on becoming change makers and trying to utilize your passions and skills for good. Now, I run a nonprofit. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Orphan Prevention. We keep mothers and children together through economic development and education. And we work to address the orphan trade and child sex trafficking. The orphan trade is a form of human trafficking. 85% of children in orphan homes worldwide have living parents. So it is a for-profit business. So a lot of these children that are abducted are either sold into the orphan homes or sold into the brothels used as sex slaves.
And you've seen this on the ground. You've been in the trenches and understand this problem from a very close level.
Yeah, I founded it in 2011 as I was just kind of traveling around the world, doing one-off volunteer projects, and really just bringing myself and going home and then kind of wondering, did I have long-lasting, sustainable change, after I'm gone? And probably the short answer of that is no. And so in 2011, I started exploring different ways that I could help and create a viable business model that could have long-lasting change. And that's when I founded the organization in Nepal. I've been traveling around the country, volunteering in orphan homes, looking for need, and that's how it was born when I discovered all these kids had living parents. So I was looking for ways that I could personally give back and utilize my skills and passions. Now, for you, it might be something completely different, right? But you have to kind of figure out, like, what am I good at? If I can do one thing for the rest of my life, what would it be? What makes my heart sing?
Yes.
What gives me joy, right? And so you start with those questions, those fundamental questions of discovering your passion, and then you work outward from there. So for Chelly, your passion, you love helping people, you love, right? You like guiding people through meditation and helping people work with self-development and discovery. And so that's why you're here, because this is how you're contributing on the planet.
And to highlight people who are doing great things in the world and who are able to talk to their experiences of dealing with this awakening and stepping into their purpose, jumping off the cliffs because suddenly their old life doesn't work for them anymore. And what's so beautiful about finding that thing that you love, that your heart wants to do, is that truly is the best way you can serve the world. So people might think, oh, it's selfish to do what you love. Go to business school, go be a lawyer, go be a doctor, which are all wonderful things if that's what you want to do. And so I think we're shifting, especially in this generation, into should do versus my heart says do this. And when you do, you're serving in your greatest capacity. And I think that's highly unselfish because you're going to give so much of yourself to do it instead of I'm going to show up, clock in, clock out. Who are you really serving, right? You're making a paycheck, you're going along the hamster wheel, but what is that doing for you? And what is that doing for everyone around you as well? So yes, all for finding the passion, and may not be easy, but going for it. And eventually you'll find yourself at a place that you never thought you could imagine when you decided back here to make that leap.
Yeah. And it's like, what resonates with you? What do you love doing? And then you figure out how you can turn your passion and skills and help the world. So for example, last fall, I had a couple join us in Nepal, and this one particular guy was a Brazilian jiu-jitsu master. And the year before, he literally saw me speak, and he came up to me and he said, I have an idea. Why don't we teach these girls that are abducted self-defense?
Love that.
And so because that was his passion and skill set already, he figured out how to turn it into a program and reverberate that his passions and skills out into the world and help others. So it's really, what do you love doing?
Yeah. What do you love doing? I really do. I really want you to think about it. Like after you watch this video, just think, like, if I could do anything, what would be that thing? It would just fill my heart up. If I could do it every day, what would that be? Think about it.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be, it could be from a micro to a macro level. So for example, say you love fashion and you love shopping. Mm-hmm. I knew a girl that created an online store, and she donated a percentage of profits to a charity, and she chose a different charity every quarter.
That's phenomenal.
So there's different ways you can give back.
Absolutely. There are so many ways. Well, I want to know how people can get more involved with your nonprofit. Is there a website? And we can put all the links below, but if there's anything our audience out there could learn about you and how to get involved with Global Orphan Prevention.
Right. So our website is globalorphanprevention.org. Please definitely visit us. There's many different ways that you can get involved. Of course, we're always looking for volunteers. We are recruiting for our associate and executive board of directors right now. And we're also looking for volunteers to come with us to India and Nepal and work in the field. or help develop our anti-child trafficking program right here in Denver. So there's different ways that you can get involved with Global Orphan Prevention. On top of that, if you'd like to associate your brand or your business with our cause, we have a lot of opportunities for integrating your brand or business into our events. We have an upcoming gala. There's so many different ways. Of course, we're looking for corporate sponsorships and partnerships, and we could never do anything that we do without our individual donors. So there's so many different ways and different levels that you can get involved.
And it's global, so you don't have to be in Denver to do it. There are ways to get a local here on the ground involved, and there are ways all over the world to contribute as well. So, well, it's a pleasure speaking with you, Katie. Thanks for joining us here on Lighthouse Conversations. Thank you for listening to Lighthouse Conversations. If this show resonates with you, it would mean so much to have you rate, review, and share. Don't forget to follow us at chellycanales.com and on social media.